Hello, welcome to Nihon Tonobi Beauty of Japanese Sword. My name is Hisashi Saito, owner of Seikodo in Ginza, Tokyo. For over 100 years, my family has served the most discerning customer of sword and sword fittings. Internationally, I'm excited to see a growing interest toward Japanese culture, and I hope that more people will be curious to explore the world of Japanese sword. In this session, I'm speaking with Ueno-san. He's a collector and a student of Japanese sword history. So Ueno-san, can you tell us about your interest in sword?
Yes, so interestingly, I entered the world of Japanese swords outside Japan. So 30 years ago, I was living in the United States, and I remember visiting a store that was owned by Robert Benson, who is known internationally as an expert on Japanese swords and also a very, very good friend. And I remember being absolutely fascinated by the beauty in Japanese swords and Japanese sword fittings. And it's also interesting to think about the growing community of collectors for swords internationally.
It's interesting to think about how the swords have been collected for centuries in Japan and today enjoyed by many around the world.
Yes, so the culture of appreciation is a great place to start thinking about the beauty and the value of a Japanese sword. So, for example, Saito-san, Seikodo deals with a very discerning clientele. So many of the items that you deal in are particularly precious. So because of that, it's no surprise that we'll find that many of your swords will have dennai, or provenance that might be tied to some of the most powerful or some of the most famous families in the history of Japan. And that tells us that sword appreciation has gone on for many centuries. Many of your swords will also have origami, or appraisal certificates that were issued by the Honnami family of hereditary sword experts. Now, the Honnami family, back in the Edo period, did very much to elevate the appreciation of Japanese swords. And in fact, one of their most symbolic accomplishments might have been the Kyoho Meibutsucho, which was compiled in the early 18th century by order of the 8th shogun Tokugawa Yoshimune, and it cataloged the Meibutsu, or the most famous swords known to exist in the time, and it's a catalog that we still look at today. And of course, many will also have certification papers from the NBTHK, or the Society for the Preservation of Japanese Art Swords, and these certifications will obviously be at different levels. And as we think about the appreciation of Japanese swords, I think it's also worth touching on Ryusatsukante, or competitions whereby learned enthusiasts would gather, carefully examine swords, and try to pinpoint the smith based on an understanding of the traits of the sword. This is still done today, and it's a lot of fun.
What do you think has created this culture of appreciation?
Well, we can talk about the technical aspects of a sword, and also understanding the historical context helps us to appreciate swords even more. But for any collector, it really starts with plain and simple beauty. So to illustrate, here we have an exceptional example by Yoshihira. So Yoshihira was one of the premier smiths of the Ichimonji school. He was active in the mid-13th century, and he lived in Bisen province, which is current-day Okayama prefecture, and at the time it was a center for sword production. This particular sword is a Tokubetsu Juyo token, so it's an absolute masterpiece. Ichimonji school blades were and continue to be highly sought after. Now, we touched on the culture of appreciation earlier. It's interesting to think that one of the earliest and possibly most famous enthusiasts of swords was Emperor Gotoba, who in the early 13th century gathered to his palace the best swordsmiths known to exist at the time, and they came to work on a monthly basis. These swordsmiths were collectively known as the Gobankaji, and half of them were from the Ichimonji school. Let's consider why Ichimonji school blades are so popular. One of the most striking aspects of this sword is the brilliant and flowery Choji Kunome Hamon, or temper line. The temper is accented with nyoi and nie, which are particles of crystalline martensite that shine and they form during the unique forging process. And looking deep into the temper, we'll see unique patterns. Ashi, yo, kinsuji, tsunagashi. And these patterns form a kind of unique collage. Characteristics like this will only be visible when we examine a sword carefully through reflecting light. I often think about how generations of collectors before us did this with candlelight.
What do you think of the G?
We can sometimes get so caught up in the beautiful hamon that we forget the story that the surface grain tells us. In this case, we see a very pronounced itame wood grain pattern. We also see a beautiful midari utsuri or misty pattern in the surface. Now collectively, traits like this are very characteristic of the Ichimonji school. So I think the fun of appreciation really starts with looking beyond the blade to see the art hidden below.
Thank you very much for watching Nihon Tonobi Beauty of Japanese Sword. I hope that many people to be interested in Japanese sword and sword fittings.